Hello, YouTube. Happy Saturday. Welcome back. Thanks to for tuning into another episode of Comics and Stuff. My name is Devin. I am your host. As always, today we are going to be taking a deep dive into the world that is World War II comics and covers. This is a very popular thing in the comic book community, collecting different classic covers from that era, the mid to late 1940s, sometimes even the early 30s. It really kind of depends on what you're looking for, but there are some beautiful war covers out there, and I couldn't think of anybody else better to bring onto the show than my friend Yaniv, aka Stray Flexin from Instagram. I'm going to bring him on in here. Yaniv, my friend, thank you so much for joining. How are you doing this evening?
Doing well. How are you, Devin?
I'm doing fantastic, my friend. It's good to see your face. I appreciate you taking the time to come out here and letting me hound you to get on the show. For those of you who aren't deeply ingrained in the comic book community, tell the internet, tell the world a little bit about you. Who is Yaniv? Who is Stray Flex, and what do you do? How'd you get your start? Let's go.
Sure. So, as you said, my name is Yaniv, and I go by Stray Flexin online. Most people on, I guess, Instagram know me, and a little bit of Facebook as well. But I primarily focus on Golden Age comics. I find the history, the covers, just really fascinating and intriguing. And the challenge of collecting them is not just so they are expensive as other key comics are, but they're also hard to find too, right? So sometimes even if you have the money to buy them, you can't buy them. So there's a little bit of play there where you have to get a little bit creative, do some trades or do some hardcore digging online, and that I like that too. Like that aspect of it. But
okay. Now,
yeah.
how long have you been collecting comics? I mean, I've known you for several years now, but like, when did you start?
I started collecting comics 8 years ago, I'd say.
8 years ago? Okay.
Yeah, I've always
Wow.
liked comics as a kid and superheroes and watched the movies and played video games and all that. But I kind of really started 8 years ago when just dove deep into the world of comics. And I went to a few garage sales. I remember buying like a long box for like $80 and just going through it and just digging through the issues, reading it, looking them up, and just kind of really it jump started my my habit of collecting. And ever since then, I just been buying cool stuff, I'd say.
Yeah, cool stuff is an understatement. So, all right, now the age old question: are you much? I know that you really like the Flash, but you also really like Captain America. Well, are you more of a Marvel or a DC guy? Which kind of World War II comics do you tend to go for?
I collect basically everything. A lot of
Mhm.
even a lot of non-Marvel or DC stuff. Some of the more esoteric and niche stuff. But I guess I'd say I lean more towards the Marvel stuff. And I do think their World War II covers have a little bit more oomph to them. Most of the time, Marvel at the time was called Timely, and a lot of those covers were done by Schomburg, especially like the Marvel Mysteries and the
Yeah,
Cap. As you know, Schomburg, is a
the
pretty,
Schomburg. Oh yeah.
yeah, he's a legend, pretty prominent World War II cover artist, and he did some fantastic covers. And you could see there on the in the background there's a poster of one of his covers.
Very cool.
He did over I think 500 covers in the Golden Age, and even Stan Lee himself said there was no other artist like him. He wasn't
Yeah.
late, and yeah, he did
Okay.
tons of work.
Now, for the internet out there, fun fact: I would not be where I am in my collection today without this man. No, there we go. This man right here, because I when I first got into comic books, I was just a very small niche little like kind of silent follower for a lot of these bigger guys. I actually ended up reaching out to Yaniv here on Instagram. Not only had he hooked me up with some of my first really big high end books, but he's also incredibly encouraging, very friendly, very knowledgeable. So I mean, I literally would probably not be here talking to you without his encouragement. Just saying. I appreciate you, sir. You were like one of the first people to bring me into, maybe I should say, kicking and screaming, dragging down into the hole of that is Golden Age comics. But I like it here, so
Well,
you know,
I'm glad I could play my little part there. And it's funny you
little,
mentioned
yeah,
that because
little.
I remember watching, I remember watching the show. I remember watching your YouTube channel years ago, before we even talked, and I thought that was kind of neat. And now here we are. I'm on
I
the
know
channel.
it.
It's fun to
It
be
is
back.
a great time to be able to kind of look back and see like I have made some really good lifelong friends in the comic book community. You are absolutely one of them. I think we at least try to talk at least once or twice a week. I know you're 3 hours, different in time zone, and you're all the way over in Toronto, and I'm all the way here in Seattle. But I appreciate your company, time, and friendship. So thank you, sir. Now, back on topic, what is it that, if you started out just collecting pretty broadly, what is it that drew you specifically to World War II comics? I know that you also collect a lot of other World War II stuff. I'd like to kind of break that down. So what brought you to that subject?
I think for everyone it's a little bit different, obviously, but for me, I feel like I've always been kind of a little bit of a history buff. World War II has always fascinated me. I have like a personal deep connection with World War II, being that I'm Jewish myself, and my grandparents or great grandparents were also, like, my family was part of the Holocaust. So I've always learned about it in school growing up, and it's always been something that's just really, I don't know. It seems like it's far away, but it's really not that long ago, right? So it's something that I think that shouldn't be forgotten. And part of my collecting the World War II comics and other World War II items is to keep that history alive, is to preserve it. And I think it's important, in today's day and age, to, like I said, to preserve that history, because what a lot of people do try to forget about that or destroy that, and what's destroyed kind of gets forgotten over time, right? I feel like that's a big a part of it. But other than that, I really do think that the World War II comics are just probably some of the most fascinating period of comic history. It's really the beginning of comics becoming popular, with characters like Captain America, even Superman, Batman obviously got in on it too. A lot of very patriotic heroes, and it was a short-lived period, because after the war ended, a lot of that stuff started going away. Even most of the wartime heroes kind of disappeared, and some of them reappeared in the Silver Age, kind of like Cap did. So it was a short period, but it was very impactful, right? So for a lot of people that couldn't actually go out and fight, this is how they fought, the war. This is what they contributed to the war effort. On most of the covers, it says "buy war bonds and stamps."
There's a lot of those.
So there's a lot of. It's propaganda. That's what it is. It's pure propaganda. And but I want to make a distinction now, just so people are clear, because to the outside person who looks at some of these covers, they can get kind of scaring. They can get kind of jarred, because it's like swastikas everywhere. There's Hitler on the cover, Mussolini. It's like, it looks super fascist, super intense. But it's good to remind people, these are like American anti-Axis or anti-Nazi propaganda items. These aren't supporting the Nazis in any way. They're not supporting Hitler. They're all against them. And part of those depictions is it's just part of it. Hitler is usually in a comical. He's either getting kind of beat up, or he's in a comical position. Yep. And it was just to kind of show the strength of America and the weakness of the other side. And even some of the comics were sent out to the soldiers. Like Fight Comics was actually read by soldiers at war. So it was kind of used for inspiration.
Yeah. I think some of it is true. Some of my favorite, Hitler covers are, there's like the boy, I think it's Boy Commandos 2, where they're like bum rushing him and about to throw him out the door.
Yeah.
And then everybody knows the classic Captain America comics #1, where Hitler's just getting punched across the face.
So that's the first. I just want to make a quick note. That's actually the first Hitler cover. First American Hitler, first Hitler cover on an American comic book. There is some other kind of weird propaganda items that do have feature Hitler, but that's the first time he's on an American comic, which is pretty cool. And the other thing about that book, I don't know if it's talked about much, but timely. So obviously Jack Kirby and Joe Simon created Captain America, and both of them were Jewish. As with 90% of the comic creators at the time, it was just that was the position that they got, because comics was considered a pretty low end job at the time. Now they're considered legends, but at the time it was just kind of something low end that most Jews found themselves to be in. And anyway, so they created Captain America, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. And when they published that cover, that comic book, Captain America #1, where Captain America punches Hitler right in the face, they actually got death threats by Nazis in America.
Really?
Yeah, because at the time, this was prior to the U.S. entering the war. And, the majority of the people did see the Nazis as being the bad guys, but there were still a lot of socialists, and there was still a big presence of the Nazi party supporters in America itself.
Hmm.
So they actually got hate from that party. And there's a story where, they got death threats and they called into the timely offices, and Jack Kirby answered. This is the story. So I'm just going to say it. I'm not sure if it really happened or not, but it's
That's
cool.
okay. Hey, always down for a good story.
So Jack Kirby answers the phone and they get death threats at the offices. And he tells the guy, "Oh, meet me downstairs. I'll see you right outside." And he went down there and no one ended up showing up. So whether it was, an empty-handed threat, but it's still, nonetheless, it's interesting to see the change from getting threats for publishing cover like that. Then a few months later, full blown, they're into the war. Everyone hates the Nazis. Those guys kind of disappeared in America.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
it's
Well,
just
and I think my favorite one is Master Comics 29. It's the one with Captain Marvel Jr. and he's got his belt and he's whooping Hitler's ass with it. And
yeah,
Hitler's
that
like,
one's
"Oh!"
cute.
And then you see Hirohito right behind him, just kind of like, "Whoa," with that really kind of like, I mean, now in 2022, it's that racist, yellow toned skin and squinty eyes and like
Right.
funny buck teeth fangs and for a lot of internet folks who don't know, so I'm Italian, Japanese, and black. I love to collect a lot of pieces of Japanese history, whereas Yaniv, and technically I'm also ethnically Jewish, but I'm not religious about it like Yaniv is, but like so I collect a lot of little bits and pieces of Japanese history, which also includes World War II stuff. So I really like Captain Marvel Jr., stuff like that. And I think that's one of my favorite just like Hitler covers. There's also the sad Hitler cover where he just looks like he's crying.
Yeah.
Is that Master Comics 10
It's
or
I think it's Captain Marvel Junior 10.
Captain Marvel Jr. 10? There we go.
It
Yeah,
says
and
on
he's
the
just like,
bottom. Yeah,
"Wah,
it's
wah, wah." Yeah,
turn to page 4 to find out why
yeah,
Hitler is
yeah,
crying. Stuff like that to get people to open the books and actually buy the comics.
yeah.
It's kind of funny.
So now what? So I mean, now I understand. Back during World War II, um, I understand how seeing Hitler getting beaten up or Mussolini or Hirohito getting beaten up on a cover is appealing at the time. Because it's America versus the Nazis or the Allies versus the Nazis, whatever have you. And I can see how that really kind of helped people feel patriotic. But nowadays, outside of the historical aspect of it, what is it that you think really drives that collectibles niche and community for people who really desire those World War II covers? Is it more, I guess, close to you, or it just
You
shouldn't
know,
be forgotten, or?
I think that's a big aspect of it, obviously, being that they were from World War II, that they were propaganda items, and that the way the covers were drawn and the purpose of them. But the other aspect of it, I believe, is just, I mean, the artwork is fantastic, and I feel like in today's day and age of collecting, where it's really revolved around social media as a big aspect of collecting, where people like to they show off their purchases, which I'm not. I do just the same. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, and it really brought a lot of these covers out there to the general public. When you look at your average or your basic Schomburg super busy World War II cover, like there's so much to look at. It's almost like looking at a cover of Where's Waldo. There's just so
Right.
many little details and
I know
things.
yeah,
It's
yeah, he
phenomenal,
does.
and I feel like that really adds to the appeal of these covers. It's not just that it's World War II based; is that the artwork that has gone in on them. It's so incredibly detailed and I think really interesting. And just there's a lot of also comical aspect too, like the Hitler covers where he's kind of getting beat up, or he's in awkward positions. Or there's one, I believe it's a Master Comics as well, where he's getting punched, or it's a National Comics, it's Uncle Sam cover where he's getting punched and his body is kind of falling over and he's contoured in like a swastika shape. And they would do these kind of little symbolism, all these little symbolisms on the cover
Kind of
itself.
like your modern day political comics, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. So yeah, I do feel like it's really the art that's, I think, grabbing people at first, and then maybe they stay for the history if the history aspect didn't really intrigue them at first. The other side of it is they're very investable. I mean, in terms of collecting as an investment, people do like to do that as well, obviously. And the World War II stuff has proven to be very valuable, especially anything Marvel.
Oh yeah.
Timely wise, they've been outperforming blue chip stocks, over the last few years at a pretty good rate. So, yeah, I think people also like to collect that for that reason as well, probably.
See, I think for me, like I would like to. There's a million World War II comic covers that I would love to just like collect and get. I think one of my other favorites is Superman 14, the Shield cover. I actually dumb enough when I first got into comics and didn't quite know what I was doing. I had a copy of it, and I sold it for another book that wasn't worth it. Now that I look back on it, but I'd love to collect that one. I'm gonna bug you to help me hunt down that Master Comics 29 with the
Yeah,
belt whip in the
that's
ass.
a
'Cause
that
that's
is a
just
tough one.
it's
It's
such
it's but it's such a great cover, like you said. I
right.
mean, it's super funny and different. Like and the fact that they were able to show the Axis
Oh,
in that kind of, you good?
uh, talk to me about Pearl Harbor comics.
Sounds good. Okay, so I just wanted to make a point about Pearl Harbor comics and specifically some of the Japanese war covers as opposed to the Nazi war covers. So primarily, where you're going to find on the World War II covers, I mean, it's all propaganda, right? So they're fighting the Axis, and the Axis consisted of the Japanese and the Germans, the Nazis during the war. Very few commie covers, as there's only in the beginning of the war when Stalin was an adversary, until later on he actually joined the Allies' forces to defeat Germany. So there you wouldn't find too many Stalin covers before that. A fun
There's a
fact
few,
is
right?
there's
There's a couple.
yeah, there's like two or three
Okay.
Stalin covers. He was actually supposed to be on Young Allies #1. He was
Hmm.
supposed to be getting punched with Hitler and Red Skull on the cover, but what happened is they took him off the cover because they ended up being they ended up being Allied forces. So they took him off the cover. But what's interesting about the Japanese covers as opposed to the German or the Nazi ones are that they're
Mhm.
a lot more gruesome than the German covers. So there'll be a lot more graphic. The violence would be a little bit more intense. You would see blood on those covers where you wouldn't really see too many blood or too much blood on comic book covers, primarily because it was for although the subject matter is pretty crazy, it's mostly for children, right? I mean, they're comic books,
Right.
but
Well, I seem to remember watching a few different documentaries and some of them saying things like, once World War or once people came back from World War II, the soldiers were more mature readers now. So a lot of companies tried to churn out more mature comic books or romance books or post-wartime books. So the childish superhero, went away. And there was more westerns, more,
right.
gangster bang 'em up shooter sort of things, as opposed to, men in tights.
Right. Yeah,
So
the post-war comics were definitely different. But just on the Japanese covers, the reasons why they were so brutal and like if you look at your average Jap cover versus the Nazi covers, there's some where the classic covers where the heads are being basically cut off. There's a lot of decapitation covers,
right.
lots of really gruesome, bloody covers. There's covers where there's like the Japanese soldiers are in the plane and they're getting shot right in the face, and a lot of that was really hardcore because the Japanese hit close to home, whereas the Germans didn't as much, right? Because of Pearl Harbor.
Right, right. Pearl
After that,
Harbor had like a
yeah, had a huge.
huge,
So they
yeah.
hated the Japanese more so than the Nazis, right? Because they
Mm,
they literally hit home. They bombed Pearl Harbor, right? So after that, I mean, the covers were they went full
went
force. They
nuts.
attacked
Yeah.
they attacked the Japanese on a lot of the covers, and a lot of them had a little insignia which said "Remember Pearl Harbor." And those covers are highly collected too. People like to collect those because they're really over the top and they're part of like a small section of comic books that actually said "Remember Pearl Harbor" on the cover. And I believe the first one after Pearl Harbor happened, one of the first ones was the Captain America comics #13,
Mhm.
where it's got a giant cap just uppercutting another giant Japanese soldier. Who at the time they were also the depictions of the Japanese were a lot more racist and stereotypical than the Germans. They depicted the Germans as traditional bad guys in their SS suits and Nazi suits firing guns, but the
Yeah.
Japanese they were a
Japanese
lot.
were demonized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like they depicted them almost monster-like, right? Or as rats with big
Well, yeah.
fangs, or
Rats, goblins, you got the that dark yellow skin, you've got the fangs, you've got the really squinty eyes, the claws.
yeah,
Yeah.
the claws is a big thing. Yeah, they really went after them, as opposed to like they saw, I guess, the Germans as more human, but the Japs they just kind of let them have it. So I think that was kind of interesting, and I do think that plays a big part of that is because of Pearl Harbor because they did
Yeah.
hit so close to home.
Now, a couple things. One thing that has spawned out of Pearl Harbor was the Okojima Collection. And now, for those who don't know, there's pedigreed comic book collections. The Okojima Collection is a collection that was a collection of comic books collected by a young girl who was at a Japanese internment camp here in the States. Is that correct? And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's correct. And in terms of pedigrees and collectability, the Okojima collection is one of the most like coveted pedigrees. And I feel like in the last few years, more and more interest have been joining these books, and the prices have been going up because people are hearing the story and they're just finding it really fascinating.
well, I
Um,
mean, they were collected and kept at an
right,
internment camp and by somebody
and
who survived and went past that. Yeah,
right, exactly. And like a big part of the value and interest in them is if whether or not they're camp copies. So the camp copy is a comic book with the Okajima signature that was actually in the period of time where it was kept at the camp versus the post camp copies. They're actually a little bit less valuable and a little bit less sought out for, just because it's people really want those books that they can
yeah.
define to that period of time where it was kept in the camp, which is really fascinating. So it's pretty crazy. So that's another big collection to come.
So
You know,
now, with excuse me, with World War II comics, there's the big titles, the obscure titles, the big covers, the obscure covers, XYZ. What are, I guess, for the mainstream folks, the folks who really want to maybe invest, maybe get into it, what are some of the biggest and best titles to look out for Golden Age World War II comics? Like, what should people be seeking out?
so like the first ones that pop to my mind, come to my mind, are definitely Marvel Mystery, like some of the timely Marvel titles. Marvel Mystery is the big one. I mean, they really went full force on the Nazis, on the Japanese. Lots of crazy war covers. But then there was the other ones that are literally geared like literally for the war, right? Fight Comics is a big one of them.
Right, right.
Fiction House had a bunch, right? Even Wings, there's a lot of war covers in there. And then there's other ones like there's USA Comics, right? National Comics with Uncle Sam Quarterly, where they're all. I mean, Uncle Sam was literally created as a American propaganda figure, right, to help enlist people into the war. He was so popular that he was actually created for World War One. It's kind of fascinating. Not a lot of people know that. I just always assumed he was,
I had no
related,
idea.
connected to World War Two. Yeah, but he was so popular that they even used him as the World War Two figurehead. But so, I mean, the mainstream ones I would say is definitely Marvel Mystery, and some of the more niche stuff or obscure. I guess like maybe some of the fictional stuff, if like the Fight Comics. Again, that's like literally created for the war. I mean, it's got it in the name. So
Okay. So now, speaking of that, there's a ton of World War II characters, heroes. I mean, so you've got everybody knows Captain America and Batman and Superman, or the Submariner. And for a lot of you guys, Submariner has some of the best World War II covers out
yeah,
there. I know all the subby covers are just really, really.
mostly done by Schomburg too, right?
Yep,
So
yep. Dude, Alex Schomburg, man, that guy is quite the he's the guy. I love his sorry, I'm gonna get off subject really quickly. He's such a has such a wide range for a comic book artist. I mean, yes, he did so many good World War II covers, but also like his airbrush stuff, his
yeah,
robot covers. A lot of people don't know that one of his most famous covers ever is Startling Comics 49. Like, it's an airbrushed robot cover, one of the most sought after sci-fi covers there is. It's expensive as crap, that people call it the Bender cover because the
yeah.
robot looks just like Bender. I mean, it's just so good.
Yeah,
Um,
it's his yeah, like you said, I mean, his wide range of artistic abilities and skills is unfathomable. He could literally do any genre, any subject, and he would crush it. Whether it's sci-fi, World War II related realism, and his airbrushing works and techniques is amazing.
yeah,
And he
yeah.
actually signed those as Zila, which is just Alex backwards. So that's a
Oh,
little
interesting.
yeah, that's a little neat thing. I remember like kind of learning about it, and I was like, oh, why is he signing these Zila? Like, what the hell is Zila? And then it took me a second. I was like, oh shoot, it's Alex backwards. Like, that's so obvious. But yeah, it's his wide range of capabilities and
Well,
artistic.
well, it's okay. It's way back there, and I'd have to get up. But
49.
I have your Schomburg piece here. He's got a Schomburg piece. It's a
Oh, we should pull it out.
Okay, let me. It's a dragon playing chess with an astronaut, and there's going to be
Yes.
a lot of glare. I think I'm going to try to avoid the glare if I can. Hold on here, folks, because of the stupid ring light. But there we go. Oh,
Bring it to the middle more. Yeah, there you go.
yeah, there we go. That is a dragon playing chess with an astronaut. Yeah, with little aliens watching it. I'll make it nice and big on the screen. I'm actually, you know what, YouTube, I'm trying to buy this off him. I want it. I don't want to send it back to his house. So, you know, if you can convince him to just let me pay for it.
I need all the Schomburg art in the world.
Hit him up on Instagram. Tell him to let Devin buy it, okay? It's at Stray Flexin with the Y. Okay, Stray Flexin. No, seriously, I want to buy it. But now, what are some of the other lesser known characters that are, you know, big for World War II books? I mean, you've got I know of the Fighting Yank, Uncle Sam, and Daredevil. And I think that's kind of it, but there's more.
There's
right?
There's a lot. My favorite, I'll just go with the start. My favorite, he's I guess he's pretty well known to the guys that collect World War II, but to your average comic fan or someone that doesn't know much about the propaganda comics, they probably won't know him. But my favorite is the Destroyer, the Mighty Destroyer.
Yes, the Destroyer.
So, yeah, he's pretty cool. And you know, his thing is that he's similar to Captain America. You know, based on it's actually Stan Lee's first character creation as well. It's
really?
a nice little fact. Yeah, my friend Josh actually got them to add that to the label of Mystic Comics 6, which was his first appearance. So it's cool because it was his first like full character creation. You know, well before he created all the legendary Marvel heroes. But what's cool about the Destroyer is that, just again, riding off the heights of Captain America, he did so well. So he has this kind of like super serum. But the thing with him is he was actually fighting in Nazi occupied Europe. Like he's actually fighting out there versus Captain America was kind of fighting at home. So that was kind of cool. And his covers are just awesome. I mean, all of his covers are great. They're all bangers. He only has a few covers. So he first appears in Mystic Comics 6. So there's 6 through 10, which is the last issue. So he's in all those covers. And then he's in a few other kind of timely comic books like All Winners. And I think it's just the All Winners run. And he does appear in like All Select and other issues inside. But he's only on a few covers and all of them are highly collected. He's a fan favorite. But other than him, I mean, there's tons. There's tons. Even the quote-unquote inspiration for Captain America's Shield, at least. The Shield, it was called The Shield, Pep Comics, #1.
Oh, the Shield, like, okay, I was about to say, like, the guy that was with Art, like, where Archie started.
Yeah, so MLJ's superhero, their patriotic superhero, which is, I think they consider him, like, the first patriotic superhero, and he literally looks like Captain America's Shield from the first issue. It's like the tri-point shield, so it's like he's just a big shield pretty much. And that's another fun fact about that is that Captain America had to have his shield changed because MLJ said that it looked too closely to their character, the Shield. So in the second issue, they changed the shield to the circle shield, which everyone knows and loves today, right? The classic iconic Cap shield. So without MLJ's
that's where Archie Comics messed up. They shot themselves in the foot for that.
I know, right? So without MLJ's shield, there wouldn't be like the iconic round shield that Cap has now. So that was kind of funny too. So another little nod to its World War II roots. But there's also so many other obscure characters. There's like V-Man, who appeared in V Comics. I think he was a Fox Features villain, or not villain, hero. Then like you said, the Fighting Yank, Black Terror. Those are two
people love
ones.
the Fighting Yank, right?
Yeah,
he's like really big.
Fighting Yank is a really cool World War II character, and his background and his story is kind of wild. It's like, and he's got that old school, like that, what is it, the Civil War era hat. The
his costume has always been interesting because he's dressed like I'm sorry if anybody can hear my 3-year-old, by the way. I am recording at home. But he's got the white shirt that he looks like it's like from the 1800s. He's got the little domino mask. He's got the 1800s hat. Is it a green cape? Like
I think it's a green cape. Yeah. It's kind of it's interesting, definitely. And again, all their names like had to do with America. The Fighting Yank, Captain America. There's also like the duo Yank and is it
Yankee and Doodle? Yankee
yeah,
Doodle?
I think it's Yank and Doodle. There's all the and they're all just super patriotic heroes, literally created for the sole purpose of propaganda to kind of help the war effort. And there's tons of them, and they all have like funny puns in their names. And I feel like a lot of people like Fighting Yank and Black Terror just because a lot of the covers were done again by Schomburg, a lot of the classic covers at least, and he was prominent in terms of like the war effort. He would, he even Fighting Yank was even popular enough to get his own series. Same with Black Terror, whereas
Right.
a lot of the other heroes, a little bit lesser known, didn't get their own series. So at a point in time, Fighting Yank and the Black Terror were the shit at one point in time.
The shits.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Now, so and so I mean, you've got your big titles, you've got your list of heroes. What about some like I had mentioned earlier, what about some of those like obscure, maybe, titles that people don't really know about? Like I think like one of the coolest ones was a Hitler cover. I bought one from you a long time ago. Actually, I bought two from you. Of the same book. It was Foremost,
yeah.
with it's just a couple of kids. They're throwing trash cans at a pumpkin on a fence, but the pumpkin is like Hitler's face, and they're just mashing that pumpkin. So
that's an interesting one.
yeah, what are some obscure titles that people can look at for some great World War II art?
Yeah, so like with because the warfare was so prominent during that time, a lot of kind of more kiddie friendly or just kind of kid gang related titles like Foremost or even headline comics. Whereas like
Yeah, big
it's a
Hitler
gang of
genie.
right, it's a gang of kids basically, and like a lot of these titles are kind of like fairly, there's not much interest in them, and then all of a sudden there's one Hitler cover that kind of stands out in those runs, and headline 8 is that big one there, where
Yeah.
Hitler's kind of coming out of the genie bottle.
And I
Um,
would say that might be one of the more expensive ones too, yeah?
yeah, definitely one of the more expensive ones, and that one's like one of the really powerful like Hitler covers that doesn't really feature another character like Captain America or Superman to kind of hold it up. Like that book is just pure like monstrous Hitler on the cover, and probably like I guess my favorite or the one that really like should be at the top list of almost every like kind of World War II Hitler cover list is Real Life Comics 3, also done by Alex Schomburg. But that's the one where Hitler's standing on the globe.
Oh yeah, the
Fire.
big menacing one, right?
Yeah, that's the ultimate Hitler cover and Hitler book, in my opinion. I was able to read a raw copy when I first got it. I didn't know what was inside, and it's actually the story of Hitler. It's his origin story, which to me is like really fascinating that they had all that information back then. I'm reading this book and it's talking about him being a failed artist at school, him enlisting in World War I, which we all know happened. And it's all listed in this book, and it's basically his rise to dictatorship. So
Interesting.
that's really fascinating. So
I wonder, and then now if I remember on that cover, they called him something
the
very interesting. Was
dictator
it
of
like
hate.
the Emperor of Hate? Was it?
No, I think it was the dictator of hate.
Dictator of Hate?
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe so.
That's a very that
It's
is
strong.
quite the title. It's a very strong title. I mean,
And just like his stance, like I said, a lot of the Hitler covers, they're really kind of goofy, wacky. He's getting beat up. He's shown as they were basically downplaying them. They were downplaying the
like America's bigger and better.
right. They're saying,
Hitler,
"Oh, they're
we're gonna
idiots,
beat his
they're
ass."
goofs," which to an extent wasn't true. I mean, they were doing some serious damage there. But like Real Life 3 was one of the first ones to kind of take him serious, and that cover it's harsh when you look at it. There's even like nods to concentration camps. They have like different little like kind of bubbles with different images, and one of the bubbles is a concentration camp. So it's pretty intense, and the fact that it couples with inside, it actually has like the quote unquote origin of Hitler. It's his story, which is based on actual truth, right? It's his actual story. So I think that makes that book like just incredibly fascinating as a piece of World War II history. But there's a few other fun ones that I'd like to mention, more obscure, I guess. Catman 20. That one is
okay.
Yeah, Catman's a fun character, but that one's really really cool. It's got a very realistic kind of tone to Hitler's character, and it's literally dead center. It's got Catman strangling Hitler right in the front.
Oh, I know that one. Yeah,
So,
that's an interesting cover because the art's really different.
It is different. I feel like as opposed to like Schomburg's kind of cartoonish style, it was a little bit more realistic, and it was just such a like harsh cover. I mean, like he's getting strangled right dead center in the cover. It's a big image of him, so that one's kind of wild. And then there's other more obscure ones, like even you want to get even more obscure, like Prize Comics 37, I believe, big green Hitler head. Like even like the Foremost that you mentioned, where they're throwing, they're doing slingshots and pumpkins are kind of dressed up as
the
as
three Axis leaders, Mussolini,
right?
Hirohito, and Hitler, and they're just
there's Bomber Comics where they're throwing the bowling ball and the pins are the Axis, which was actually taken from Sensation Comics 13, where Wonder Woman was throwing a bowling ball and the pin. And this one's kind of funny. It's like a double entendre. Like the pinheads, we're basically calling them pinheads, were Hitler or Hirohito and Mussolini, and they were like literally the heads of the bowling pins. So basically calling them pinheads at the same time, so I thought that was kind of funny.
A good extra middle finger to those
right.
guys.
there's a lot of little things like that. And I wanted to just add about, since we're talking about Hitler covers, I mean, that's a big aspect of the, I guess, a big like kind of subgenre of World War II comics and World War II comic book collecting is the Hitler covers. There's some that like even to this day, some people debate if it's a Hitler cover or not. And I feel like at least from what I could see, from what I've learned over the years, and from what like CGC classifies as Hitler covers, there needs to be at least, in my opinion, at least two things. I mean, they have to have these two things to be considered Hitler covers. If they have one, it's kind of questionable, but if they have two, it's generally 100% a Hitler cover. It's the combed kind of the traditional Hitler hair, where it's kind of combed a little bit long. Maybe that hipster hair, I don't know what you would call it today, and then the Hitler stash, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Right. And then it has to have a swastika or something kind of with it, indicating that it is a Nazi, and it's usually Hitler. Because there's a few covers out there. I think there's an Air Fighters one that some people kind of call it a Hitler cover, is quasi. Some people just put Hitler cover in the eBay title, right? Because they want to get some more views and money, but it's not really a Hitler cover. It has to have those are the two big caricatures of Hitler. So even in that pumpkin cover, like I said, it would have that hair like combed down a little bit long, and then it would have the Hitler stash. And then for Mussolini, it would usually be a wide body. So like for the pumpkin, it would be like a big fat pumpkin. It would usually, because he was a pretty big dude with a big round face, and it would have that Italian cap on it. And then for the other Axis leader like Hirohito, it's sometimes it's weird. Like the Japanese ones are either Hirohito or Tojo, and sometimes it's hard to tell who's who. But for either of them, they usually show like the glasses, buck teeth, and those are kind of like the main, and obviously the rising sun flag. Right. Those are the main indicators.
What is the one book that I think is it Air Ace 2 that has the Japanese airman, and he's got like the
Tokyo
big
Kid?
Huh?
Are you talking about the Tokyo Kid? So that's really cool.
It's I think Jeff Golden Age Guru, he had one on his Instagram a little while back, but it was a Japanese soldier or an airman, and he just had this huge like rat face, big fangs, glasses.
Yeah, you're talking about Tokyo Kid. So that's actually I'll tell you a little bit of history. It's kind of cool. So I think you're talking about Air Ace 2 V2, I believe.
Yes,
that's what you're talking about.
Yes,
yeah,
that one exactly.
I think it's a hanging cover, but in the forefront of the cover, there is this, again, really classic depiction of how they depicted the Japanese at the time. And remember, this is during the war, right? I mean, it was super stereotypical, super racist. The depictions are terribly done. But again, it was again for the war effort.
It's a product of its time.
Yeah, so you just got to keep that in mind. But that was actually an actual character similar to Uncle Sam during the war that was actually shown on propaganda posters and the back of magazine ads, which I wish I had one right next to me to show you, but we could probably pull some.
We'll add it later.
Yeah. So he's actually created by a Japanese guy. It's actually really fascinating, the history behind him. I don't have it off the top of my head right now, but his name is the Tokyo Kid, and he's like the opposite of Uncle Sam, if you will. So he's like he was the go-to kind of guy for the Japs or for the Axis. And he would show up on different kind of magazine covers and even World War II posters. And I think he only had one comic debut in it. That's that cover. And not a lot of people know that that's an actual character. That's an actual kind of World War II figure, if you may, the Tokyo Kid.
Interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, and it's funny, like his magazine covers, it would always have to do with something like something super over the top, something goofy, showing that the Axis is not well trained, or they would always have these huge stereotypes, and that would accompany him usually. So we could probably pull a few up so you can, and then compare it to the cover. You can see it's literally the same character. So that's where they got that person from. Yeah.
Okay. So now here's a good one that so I understand, World War II comics that were printed during World War II, they have a very high level of collectability. People really like them, people want them, they're very desirable. But after World War II, there were still World War II comics printed even up until like the 70s.
Yeah.
What do you say about things like what is the one, the girl who loved the swastika, and the cover is just adorned, like grossly adorned?
Yeah, you can post that on
Hansi?
Facebook. Yeah, Hansi, the girl who loves the swastika. I think it's Hansi. Yeah, so I know if you post that on Facebook, I know some people gotten their posts removed, or some hate for how can you support that crap. But it's like, come on, it's not. Again, it's a special distinction to make. They are 100% not Nazi affiliated or pro-Nazi.
Oh, they're all anti-Nazi propaganda.
And that one actually has a very fascinating story. Obviously the cover pulls you in. It's like, what the hell? Again, it's like this blonde girl, classic German girl, I think, and then swastikas everywhere, all around the cover.
The entire cover.
Yeah, even more so than your average Schomburg World War II cover, which usually has a lot. It's pretty intense. But when you read it, from what I could remember, it's the story of the girl growing up and falling in love with the swastikas. I think it was like a Christian girl. It's a crazy story. But again, it's to kind of shed light into that stuff. And it was produced in the 70s, and there's a lot of them out there. They did print a lot of them. So, I mean, it's collectible, but it's not too valuable as of yet. And I think it does have a good story. So if you buy one, try to get a raw copy and flip through it and read it, because it's quite fascinating. But the war comics that came out after the war, after, like, specifically the war ended after 45, they are less collectible than obviously the World War II comics that came during the war. There's some cool Sergeant Fury covers. They didn't stop showing Nazi covers. They were still a big aspect of comics, but it doesn't have the same impact as the ones that actually came out during the war. And like you mentioned earlier, once the war ended, I mean, people are sick of the superhero comics because they focused so much on the war, because there was so much propaganda. They were done. They wanted to move on. They wanted to enjoy their life, right?
They need something a little new.
And that's why after the war, like the superhero comics were dying out, because a lot of them just relied on the Axis, right? They relied on all the World War II propaganda. And some of them kind of became super, I mean, like, especially Superman and Batman, the runs that didn't die out, they still stayed. I mean, they became super stale. There's covers of Superman, like, gardening, right? There's all these silly covers.
Really bad covers.
Yeah, it's really bad. And those are the ones that survived. Many of those superheroes, they died with the war, right? Because it was over. Their sole creation, especially those patriotic heroes fighting Yankee Black Terror, those sole creation was for the war. And then the ones after, they just became into like these crime covers, which people, they don't really love as much as this.
Right.
There isn't that special thing about them. And then romance comics came out. So after the superheroes died, romance and pre-code horror was the big thing.
Oh, pre-code horror, that's an entirely different video.
Sure. That was popular right after the war. Like they switched off to romance, some westerns too, pre-code horror,
some sci-fis. I mean, you had guys like Adam Strange, Space Ranger, always got to plug him. Captain Comet, all that stuff. I was talking to Robbie, Attic Comics, a couple weeks ago, and I had to make sure I always plug my Space Ranger. All right, he's
you love him.
he's in a yellow tight suit and a half bubble space helmet and a ray gun. Come on, I mean, you can't get more. Anyways, I digress. So now after the war, people started getting into these other comics, but World War II comics were still being produced, and just comics or war comics in general. So we get into characters like Easy Company, Captain Rock. We get or Sergeant Rock. We get Mademoiselle Mademoiselle Marie and Alfred Pennyworth's origin story as a World War II operative, and So what about these books that were produced later? Some of them are still demanding pretty decent prices, and I think war covers, especially covers by Russ Heath, just because of those gray tone painted
Yeah, I
covers,
mean,
you
yeah,
know.
his covers are phenomenal.
Oh yeah, Russ Heath is I love Russ Heath. I don't even want to talk about it. Like I'll start ranting, but
He's like the
um,
dogfight king, like in terms of the air combat or
yeah.
dogfight covers, the best. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so now what are your thoughts on where war comics are sitting today in terms of post World War II war comics? So things like Sergeant Rock and Easy Company or The
Yeah, I
Haunted
mean,
Tank or Mademoiselle Marie or any of those guys.
I think are you talking about like the Atlas 50s and later 60s war
Yeah,
covers?
and like like and DC stuff as well, like that had like all the like what is the what is their Native American pilot guy or Black Hawk or uh their dog like Rex the Wonder Dog
Yeah,
and yeah, so like what are your thoughts on all of these war characters? What do you think are these going to pick up in such a similar way to World War II books? Are they really desirable or as desirable even if they don't have Hitler on them? Like what are your thoughts on those?
I think some of them. I do think they're incredible covers. There's some incredible runs even after the war, and a lot of them have been picking up some steam, picking up collectability and in value as well. I don't think they're ever going to reach the actual war era war covers, but I do believe, and I am kind of even specking on these. I buy a lot of them and
Yeah.
keep them because they're so cheap right now. A lot of the 50s war stuff, the Atlas stuff, you got battle stories. They all have battle or war in the cover, war action, war stories, war comics, like all these kind of 50s war covers where they're fighting the Koreans or they're fighting the commies later. Like all those war covers are some really phenomenal art, and they're hard as hell to find in good shape, like above a fine. They're really hard to find in really decent shape, and they get they get really valuable once you get into those high grades. And I think
Right.
those are really starting to take off now. Whereas you used to be able to find those for $20, $50, $100. You still can for a lot of them. You still can, but there's certain covers in there like flamethrower covers that are just
Oh yeah,
phenomenal.
flame. Yeah. Now, what about now, and this might coincide with like world events, but also what about like Cold War covers? I know of like two Cold War covers that are phenomenal. I've owned them both, sold them both, regretted selling them both. Can't find new copies of both. But
Which
outside of
ones?
that, Marvel Family 77 and 78.
Oh
God,
yeah, those are
I
great.
I will never forgive myself for ever getting rid of those. How dumb was I? But what are there a lot of Cold War covers
There are a
and
lot of people like to collect those.
yeah,
The one of my favorite ones. I don't know why it's blanking. I think it's Battle Cry #1. I don't want to say the wrong one. I believe it's. I don't know why I'm forgetting or blanking
that's
on it.
okay.
But
We'll have Compost correct it later.
yeah,
He's
I think it's
my
Battle
man in
Cry
the
number
chair.
one. But it's a crazy commie Cold War cover where there's it's literally like a first person view cover where you're the communist, and you know that because your hands are out, and on the back of the hand is the sickle, right? The hammer and sickle, which is like what you would see as the traditional depiction of communism. So then you got the guy literally flamethrowing you like right in front of you. It's super intense. Yeah,
Wow.
it's a really incredible cover. And
I'll
even
have to
some of
look
the
it up.
later, yeah, it's a great one. Even some of the later subby covers are really, and Cap covers. I mean, like the last few issues of Cap. Again, the enemy switched from the Nazis over to a little bit of horror, and then back to
And then right to
communism.
the
Yeah,
Russians.
yeah,
Yeah.
to the Russians, to communism when the Cold War started. And like the last issue of Cap, it's like Cap, the commie smasher. So it's like, yeah,
Okay.
it was a big.
So now, do you think with like and this is totally a speculation thing? Do you think that there's any potential for these Cold War covers to really start ramping up? Maybe not to the heights of World War II comics, but like with Russia being in the eyes of many Americans, the enemy again. Do you think that these World War II cover or these not sorry these Cold War covers have that potential to start kind of climbing up in price? Do you think that
Yeah,
that's going to have any effect on it?
I think they have. It's hard to say if current events really have an impact. I think they were already in the trajectory to kind of go up in value. Like I said, I mean, with comics, it seems like there's a hierarchy, right? So there's certain books that go up first, and then since those have gone up so much, people kind of look for the next thing to buy or invest in, and then those kind of follow suit. So it seems
Right.
like, World War II, then the 50s war covers, because those ones are already so expensive. So people kind of went on to the 50s war covers, and a lot of the Cold War stuff is part of that. I mean, the covers, the art is phenomenal. A lot of
Yeah.
Russian stuff that, like you said.
Yeah.
And
To the world out there, if anybody has Marvel Family 77 and 78 and like 30, 35, 40, and you don't need them, Instagram me, please.
Give them
Anyways.
to
Continue, my friend. I'm sorry.
No, okay. In terms of like the war that's going on with Russia right now, I don't know. It probably did, like, spark some more interest, but I still think it's a different time, and the whole Russia thing it's kind of sad because it's not even like the whole country that it's basically a dictator that they have, right? So
Right.
I feel bad for the Russian people, and also like the Russians over here, because again, like it's
right, because they're people trying to live their lives, and they're not.
As every Russian has an enemy when it's not the case. Like what do they have to do with when they have a leader that decides to do that? What can you do, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for people to remember that the action of one person does not mean that that entire group of people is bad, and a lot of people get swept up in that mob mentality of, well, if there's one bad egg, they're all bad eggs, and that's not how we should treat people. Everybody is an individual; they have their own story, and everybody deserves their data to express who they are, and if they're a shit person, then they're a shit person. If they're a good person, then they're a good person. So that's my 2 cents there.
Yeah.
Now, what would you say, you as an experienced collector, I mean, you have some insane comic books, and I mean like books that are worth cajillions of dollars, but I mean, like you didn't come from like with a silver spoon in your mouth. You worked really hard to get where you're at, right? So you know what it's like to really hustle and try to like sell your books, flip your books, hunt books down. What would you say to, especially with today's climate for rare comics? I mean, it's just so expensive that so many people are priced out of being able to collect the stuff that they want to collect, which really sucks. It's really sad, because I love this community, and I really want everybody to be able to get into it and enjoy their comic books. So what would you, Yaniv, say to somebody who said, you know what, I would really like to get into World War II comics, but I'm priced out, I can't afford it? Where would you send somebody to start? How would you tell somebody to get
honestly, I think some people look at, like, the timelies, for instance, so the big classic covers, and they see the big price tags that they come with, and they are super expensive. There's no going around that. But I think there's so much so many amazing covers, and so much great art in World War II, and so many great titles and runs outside of like the big ones, that are still super affordable. I mean, like if you look at lots of Wings comics have some really awesome war covers, plain covers, and they're not that expensive for the most part. Air Fighters, Air Ace, some of the later issues. Like you could find a lot of kind of cool, or even some really more obscure, esoteric ones. You could find a lot of these for not too much. Even the fight comics, like in low grade, some of the issues aren't that expensive. You could probably find some for under 150 to $100, which I still feel like for something from World War II is quite affordable. When you're kind of getting into that range where you can't spend thousands on the timelies, I think there's a lot of good alternatives, and I'll probably send you some photos so you could kind of put up. But there's still a lot of war comics that are not super expensive, or even like a title like Real Life Comics, right? The number 3 is a big one, but other than that, I mean, most of them are cheap. And the Schomburg covers in that run, like the same guy who did all these expensive timely covers that everyone loves to collect, and they're like $40, $50, $60. You could pick them up all day for those prices. They're still slept on. So I feel like if you're a collector that wants to get in it and is kind of scared by the price tag, don't look at the big ones right away. Kind of slowly build your way up. Collect some of the smaller, more obscure ones. There's a lot of great war covers. The art's still phenomenal on them, and for a fraction of the cost. So you can buy those, collect them, save up, then trade and sell, and work your way up to get a big one that you want. And also, my other biggest tip was, like, don't be too nitpicky about the grade. When you're collecting the World War II stuff, like, it doesn't matter if it's restored, if it's incomplete, if it's married, if it has the cover and it has some pages, or even if it's just the cover, it's still a treasure. It's still a gem, and it's still highly collected. And if you can find a cover or a book you want, you might not see it again for God knows how long. I mean, a lot of these books are especially the more obscure Hitler covers, there are like 10 or less in the census, you know. And I think that like if you could find them incomplete or restored, it's still okay. It doesn't really matter because I mean, just having the book itself is a gem, and you know,
Right.
I talk a lot about restored comics, but that's a whole other topic for sure.
I would like to do a video covering restored comics, but something that you did say, and I think this has actually been repeated in a few of the videos that or podcasts that I have recorded. And this is what I'm hearing from a lot of the bigger collectors is, you know, collect what you love, unless you're like some sort of high-end investor who needs to make $1 million. Don't worry about you don't put so much emphasis on, you know, getting a 9.8, you know, or 9.9, or as close to that as possible.
Yeah,
Don't worry about spending the $100 million on something. Just get something that you're going to love and make you happy. And I think that's a really good, and it's a theme that I see amongst a lot of the larger higher end collectors, especially like folks that have been in the game for a long time. um you know, like, and like I said, I mean, you know, worked really hard to get where you're at. You didn't just come into the game with, you know, a couple, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to spend. You worked hard,
yeah.
you
No,
know.
I mean,
So
everything I got is from just basically trading and selling other
yeah,
items. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to afford these
it
books.
takes a lot of time to
Yeah,
get, and it's another funny thing is like I remember the first time I ever spoke to you, and I was looking at your Instagram page, and I was just like, and I was just like, dude, how do you do that? Are you rich? Are you like, do you just got it like that? And you were like, nah, bro, like just give it time. You'll be able to figure it out. Like you just gotta be patient, hustle, make friends, make trades, like. And I didn't believe that I was ever going to be able to, in my head I was like, I'm never going to be able to
you
get to
know,
that guy's
right?
level. I'm never going to get there. He's got this insane. But now like I've got this collection that I'm just like, I have books that I never thought that I'd be able to own ever. I was like, nope, I'm
Yeah.
never going to own that. Never. That is too expensive. That is too
The
out
starting
of touch.
49, that's a big one, and you got lots
Yeah.
of incredible art. And yeah, I mean, it happens. I feel like, you know, people get, you know, like, again, with social media and stuff, they see other collections, or like they get all discouraged, and you know, just kind of like, you know, don't worry about it. It's not a race. There's no race to get these things. You kind of got to
Yeah.
work on your own time. And I think if you slowly build up, you know, buy, sell, trade, you can get to these points, you know. And the other thing about Golden Age, I hear sometimes like, oh, I want to get into Golden Age, but it's too expensive. You know, and that's like I feel like
There
that's
are expensive
myth.
books, but
Yes, exactly. Like as with anything, but there's
right.
tons of books that are inexpensive. So many Golden Age books that are under $100. You know, I'm going to cons and I'm digging through the bins, and there's awesome war covers, even Hitler covers I found for under $100. It's possible. You can do it. You know, just don't. You're not going to go for the
Yeah.
main
It's
one.
just
But
patience.
yeah, you need
Be
time.
patient.
And I still feel like a lot of this stuff is still affordable, under $100 for a World War II era comic book that has the actual the war on it, so like depicted on the cover. I feel like is still a big thing, and in due time, it probably won't be under $100 forever, but you can still
Yeah.
find lots of great covers for those prices. And yeah, and I know it's funny because people, you know, sometimes will tell me it's, you know, Golden Age is so expensive. And I look at their page, you know, their Instagram page, and it's like they have a Tale City 9, or they have like Fantastic Four 1 and all these X-Men 1. It's like, dude, those books are expensive. They're more expensive sometimes
Yeah.
than like Golden Age
Yeah.
books.
There
So
are
it's,
some Silver Age books that will far
yeah,
outsell a lot
yeah,
of Golden Age
they
books.
really are. So I feel like the Golden Age, in the grand scheme of things, compared to how many copies there are, you know, versus the Silver Age where there's so many more copies, and the prices are just insane for the amount of copies out there. The demand is just high, and the demand is growing in the Golden Age as well. But I still feel like you can still get deals.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, Yaniv, we are coming up on that hour and 10 minute-ish mark, something like that. I'm not looking at the timer, but you know, so we're just about finished. Do you, before I get you out of here, man, do you have anything that you wanted to you know, have the viewers know, any wisdom you want to impart to the folks watching?
If anyone ever wants to hit me up or has any question or wants to chat about Golden Age comics or World War II books, or even just World War II art or memorabilia, you can definitely send me a message on Instagram at Strayflexin. That's STREYFLEXIN. And I'm always happy to chat with other like-minded collectors.
All right, buddy. Well, thank you. You know what? Thank you so very much for taking the time out of your day to like just come here and sit and talk with me and just listen to and talk to me about comic books and listen to me rant. And I really do appreciate it. I know you've got a lot going on. You're up in Canada. I know you're making your way down to the States, and I know that that's really time consuming. So I do appreciate you, and I know there's a time difference too, so it's a little later for you than it is for me. But all right, buddy, I'm gonna put you out here in just a moment. Thank you so much for being here again. Everybody, please make sure that you follow my buddy Yaniv on Instagram. It's Strayflexin, Strey Flexin. You also just see his little Instagram thingy there. Anyways, though, so give him a follow. Hit him up if you guys ever want to talk about Golden Age comic books, and hit him up if you ever want to deal, because the way I my nickname for him is the Iron Negotiator. So having said that, folks, thank you so much, Yaniv. I will catch up with you in a few minutes. Let me say bye to these guys. All right, YouTube. Well, that was it. Thank you so much to all of you guys for taking the time to come watch us talk and just chat back and forth about all of these comics. I hope that you guys were able to take something away from this and learn something. I know I did, and I hope that this was able to help some of you guys find a passion, or maybe find your way into a passion. If you guys want to continue the conversation about comic books, make sure you guys follow my Discord channel's Instagram. It's The Collector's Room, or @Collector's Room. You can also make sure to hit that link in the bio that takes you to the Discord server, where we have folks talking about comic books, pulp magazines, trading cards, action figures, everything, video games, original art. We keep the conversation going 24/7. There's a great group of folks in there. Just click that link in the Instagram's bio or down in the description here, and you'll be able to go straight to our Discord and chat. Otherwise, you can also support the channel by liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing, and hitting that bell for notifications. And outside of that, you guys are all set. So I appreciate every single one of you, and I'll see you guys next Saturday.